Sophia Carter's hands trembled slightly as she held the stack of cards and gifts, her heart swelling with a familiar mix of excitement and longing. She stopped before the fireplace in their cozy, worn-out living room and carefully placed the pile on the plush rug. She smiled as she sank to her knees, her fingers brushing over the colorful wrapping paper. 14 gifts. 5 more than last year. Her lips curved into a wistful smile, the pale pink hue of her lips betraying a sense of quiet gratitude. Birthdays were always special to Sophia, not because of grand celebrations or elaborate parties, but because they were the day her mother, Amelia, allowed herself to splurge. Sophia knew their modest lifestyle left little room for indulgence. Yet, her mother always found a way to make her feel extraordinary, even if it meant skipping meals or working late shifts at the convenience store. Hope filled her chest as Sophia reached for the largest box, wrapped in sparkling blue paper. Could it be the laptop she had been dreaming about for months? Her hands paused, savoring the moment, before a firm hand rested on her shoulder. "Oh, no, you don't," came her mother's stern voice from behind. Sophia groaned theatrically, falling back onto the rug. "Just this once, Mom, please." Amelia crossed her arms, her fiery red hair framing her freckled face like a curtain. Despite the gentle humor in her eyes, her tone left no room for argument. "Not a chance, young lady. Go get ready for school." "But it's my birthday," Sophia whined, pouting in a way she knew her mother could rarely resist. "Exactly," Amelia replied, raising an eyebrow. "And as the birthday girl, your responsibility is to follow my rules. Now scoot." Reluctantly, Sophia rose to her feet, her gaze lingering on the pile of presents she had yet to open. "I'll come back for you," she whispered to the gifts, her voice filled with playful defiance. She climbed the narrow staircase to her room and glanced back at her mother, bustling around the cramped kitchen. Still, Amelia was buttering toast in her faded pajamas, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sight tugged at Sophia's heart. They had moved from city to city along the East Coast for as long as she could remember. New Jersey was their most extended stop yet, 2 whole years. Maybe her mother had finally outrun the shadows that always seemed to chase them. Sophia's thoughts wandered, as they often did, to the father she had never met. Her mother refused to speak about him, brushing off every question with the same vague response. "He didn't want us, and that's all you need to know." Yet the mystery gnawed at Sophia. Who was he? Why had he left? What was her mother protecting her from? "Stop staring at me like that, or you'll bore a hole through my head," Amelia called out, her tone light but edged with weariness. Startled, Sophia blinked and turned away. "Sorry, Mom," she mumbled, bolting up the stairs to prepare for another ordinary school day. Ordinary, except it wasn't. Today was her birthday, and in her heart, she felt a quiet yearning for something more. Something that might finally fill the empty spaces left unanswered. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the worn wooden floorboards as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. She could hear her mother moving downstairs, the sounds of clinking dishes, and the occasional chair scrape echoing through the tiny house. For as long as Sophia could remember, it had always been like this. Just the two of them, side by side against the world. They had moved more times than she could count, always packing up their few belongings and leaving behind friends and half-finished memories. Her mother never explained why. "It's safer this way," Amelia would say, brushing off Sophia's questions with a sad smile. In New Jersey, things had been different. They had stayed longer than usual, and Sophia had finally begun to feel a sense of belonging. Her schoolmates knew her name, her teachers praised her, and she had even joined a small after-school art club. It was as if, for the first time, her life was building roots. Still, a shadow of unease lingered, an invisible thread tying her mother to a past she refused to discuss. Sophia's gaze fell on a photograph in the mirror above her dresser. It was an old picture of her and her mother when she was barely 6. Her mother's hair was brighter then, her face softer, and her eyes shone with a joy that Sophia had rarely seen since. The girl in the photo held a broad smile, clutching a toy rabbit her mother had sewn by hand. It was one of the few constants in their ever-changing life. The questions bubbled up again. Who was her father? What had made her mother so guarded? so determined to shield Sophia from whatever shadows lurked in their past. She had asked once, years ago, during one of their long car rides between cities. Amelia's answer had been short and clipped, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. He didn't want us, and I don't want to talk about it. After that, Sophia learned to keep her curiosity to herself. But the curiosity never left. It clung to her, growing stronger as she got older, and today, on her 13th birthday, it felt like it might burst. Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. "Sophia, breakfast is ready." Sophia shook off the heaviness in her chest and made her way downstairs. The smell of buttered toast and scrambled eggs filled the air. Amelia set a bowl of rice cereal on the kitchen island, her movements quick and efficient. "Eat up," her mother said, pushing a blue lunch pack toward her. "And remember, come straight home after school. No parks, hanging out at anyone's house and wandering." Sophia sighed. "Not even today, Mom. It's my birthday." Amelia paused, her expression softening. She came around the island and placed a gentle hand under Sophia's chin, lifting her face. "Sophia, we're still new here," she said quietly. "I just want you to be safe. Please, promise me." Sophia nodded reluctantly. "Okay, Mom, I promise." But in her heart, she felt the stirrings of rebellion. Today was her day, and she wanted more than just safety. She wanted answers. The walk to school was brisk, the cool morning air carrying the faint scent of rain. Sophia kicked a small pebble down the cracked sidewalk, her thoughts returning to her mother's words. She loved her mother deeply, but there were times when the constant rules and warnings felt suffocating. What was her mother so afraid of? The pebble skipped ahead and landed near a figure sitting on the curb. Sophia slowed, her eyes narrowing as she took in the man. He was slumped against the wall of a shuttered storefront, his clothes tattered and his face hollow. His dark hair fell over his forehead in uneven strands, and his sunken eyes seemed to look through everything. Sophia's first instinct was to hurry past. Her mother's warnings about strangers echoed in her mind like a siren. But as she approached, the man looked up and smiled at her. Not the manic grin of someone desperate, but a soft, sad curve of the lips that seemed to carry years of untold stories. The pebble she had been kicking stopped at his feet. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand before tossing it back in her direction. "Off to school?" he asked, his voice hoarse but steady. Sophia hesitated. "Yes." The man nodded, his gaze dropping back to the ground. "Then don't let me keep you." For a moment, Sophia thought about walking away. But something about the man's demeanor held her in place. He looked hungry, desperately so. Without thinking, she unzipped her lunch pack and pulled out the tuna sandwich her mother had made. "Here," she said, extending it toward him. "It's not much, but it'll help." The man looked up sharply, his hollow eyes filling with something unreadable. He reached out with trembling hands and took the sandwich, cradling it like something precious. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia nodded, unsure what else to say. She glanced at the sky, feeling the first cold drops of rain on her cheek. Before she could move, the man reached the alley behind him and pulled out a battered umbrella. "Stay here," he said, opening it over her head. "The rain's picking up." Sophia hesitated again, her mother warning her against lingering with strangers. But the man's kindness felt genuine, and her heart told her to trust him. As they stood there, sheltered under the umbrella, she couldn't help but ask, "What's your name?" The man hesitated before answering, his voice barely above a whisper. "Logan." The name felt heavy, like it carried a weight she couldn't see. Sophia watched him closely, noticing how his eyes darted away when he said it. There was something about him, something familiar she couldn't quite place. As the rain lightened, Logan stepped back, folding the umbrella. "You should get going," he said. "You'll be late." Sophia nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. But as she turned to leave, she glanced back one last time. Logan stood there, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. And then, he said something that sent a chill down her spine. "I'll see you again, Sophia." The way he said her name made her pause. She didn't recall telling him what it was. As the day wore on, Sophia found it increasingly difficult to focus. Even as Mr. Harding, her history teacher, droned on about the American Revolution, Her thoughts circled back to Logan. His hollow cheeks, sad eyes, and how he had said, "I'll see you again, Sophia." It didn't make sense. She hadn't told him her name, had she? Sophia glanced around the classroom. Jaden, her bespectacled seatmate, was furiously taking notes while Maya doodled in the margins of her notebook. Everyone else seemed engrossed in their little worlds. Taking a deep breath, Sophia slipped her phone out of her bag, hiding it beneath the desk. Her fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to send a message to her mother. She typed a quick text, "Mom, I met a man today. He knew my name. Do you think it's someone you know?" Before she could hit send, she hesitated. Her mother would panic. She always did when it came to strangers or anything remotely unusual. Sophia deleted the message and shoved the phone back into her bag. The rest of the day dragged on, and by the time the final bell rang, Sophia felt restless and distracted. She found herself lingering behind as her classmates filed out of the building. A gnawing curiosity had taken hold of her. What if I went back? Just for a minute? She glanced at the school gates, where her friends laughed and waved goodbye. Her mother's words rang in her ears. Come straight home. No detours. But the pull to return to the alley was too strong. Before she could second-guess herself, Sophia turned away from the gates and retraced her steps. The closer she got to the alley, the heavier her heart felt. The streets were quieter now, the morning rush replaced by the steady hum of distant traffic. When she finally reached the alley, she paused, her breath catching. It was empty. Sophia stepped closer, eyes scanning the dim space for any sign of Logan. The sandwich wrapper was gone, and the rain had washed away any footprints. She turned the corner, hoping to glimpse him further down the street, but there was nothing, just the dull gray afternoon sky and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Disappointment settled over her like a weight. She was sure he would still be here, waiting with that same sad smile. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the bricks of the wall where Logan had been sitting. Heart pounding, Sophia reached for it and carefully unfolded the damp note. In shaky, uneven handwriting, it read, "We'll meet again. Trust your instincts." Oh. Sophia stared at the note, her fingers trembling. Her instincts? What was that supposed to mean? Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant rumble of an engine. She looked up to see a sleek black car turning onto the street, its windows tinted dark. It was out of place in the rundown neighborhood, and Sophia felt a prickle of unease as it approached. The car slowed as it neared her, and the passenger side window rolled down. A man in a crisp blue dress shirt leaned out, his expression unreadable. "Sophia Carter?" he asked, his voice smooth but unfamiliar. Sophia took a step back, clutching the note tightly in her hand. "Who's asking?" The man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm a friend of Logan's. He asked me to find you." Every instinct in Sophia screamed to run, but her curiosity anchored her in place. "What does he want?" The man's smile widened slightly. "To keep you safe. But I can't explain it here. Will you come with me?" Sophia shook her head, her grip on the note tightening. "I don't know you." The man sighed, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a photograph and held it out for her to see. Sophia hesitated before stepping closer, her eyes narrowing as she took in the image. It was her mother, years younger, her fiery red hair untamed, and her face glowing with happiness. Beside her stood a man with hazel eyes and a boyish grin, holding a guitar. Sophia's breath hitched. She recognized the man immediately. It was Logan, but younger, healthier, and full of life. The stranger in the car spoke again, his tone gentle. "Logan is your father, Sophia. He sent me to bring you to him." Sophia's world tilted. The note in her hand fluttered as she stared at the man in disbelief. Her father? The man she had always wondered about, the man her mother had refused to talk about, was alive. And he had been right here just a few hours ago. Torn between fear and curiosity, Sophia glanced at the photo again. The answer to the question that had haunted her for years was finally within reach. "What if this is a trap?" she whispered, more to herself than to the man. "It's not," he replied, "but you'll have to trust me to find out." Sophia hesitated, her heart pounding as she weighed her options. Then, With a deep breath, she opened the car door and climbed inside. Her journey toward the truth had begun. Sophia sat rigid in the back seat of the sleek black car, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The photo of her mother and Logan lay on the seat beside her, a silent reminder of the reality she was now stepping into. The man driving the car, who had introduced himself as Ethan Blake, glanced at her occasionally through the rearview mirror. His expression was calm and unreadable, as if he were accustomed to handling situations that left others reeling. "I know this is overwhelming," Ethan said after a long silence, "but I promise you'll get answers soon." Sophia didn't reply. Her mind was too tangled with thoughts, each colliding into the next. Her father, alive, here in New Jersey. The man she had met that morning, Logan, was not just a stranger but her father. And now, she was being taken to meet him again under circumstances she could barely comprehend. "Why now?" Sophia finally asked, her voice shaky but firm. "If he's my father, why did he wait 13 years to show up? Why didn't he want me before?" Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "It's not that simple," he replied. "Your father, Logan, he's made mistakes, yes, but there's more to the story than you realize. He's been trying to protect you." Sophia scoffed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "Protect me? By staying away? That doesn't make sense." Ethan sighed, his gaze flickering to her in the mirror. "Sometimes, staying away is the only way to keep someone safe." The car slowed as they turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street. Sophia's heart raced as she spotted her house at the end of the block. It looked the same as always, small, slightly weathered, but filled with memories of her and her mother. But something was different. A police car was parked out front, its lights off, but its presence unmistakable. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she noticed the figure standing on the porch. Amelia's mother was pacing back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. "Mom!" Sophia exclaimed, opening the car door before the vehicle stopped. Amelia turned, her eyes wide with relief and panic as Sophia ran toward her. "Sophia, where have you been?" Before Sophia could answer, Amelia's gaze shifted to Ethan, who had stepped out of the car and approached them slowly. Her expression hardened, and she moved protectively in front of Sophia. "Who are you?" Amelia demanded, her voice sharp and trembling. "What do you want with my daughter?" Ethan stopped a few feet away, his hands raised in peace. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Ethan Blake. I'm a friend of Logan's." Amelia's face paled at the mention of Logan's name, and it seemed she might collapse for a moment. "Logan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Ethan said gently. "He's alive, and he wants to see Sophia." Amelia's reaction was immediate and visceral. "No," she said, shaking her head vehemently. "Not. You tell him to stay away. He has no right to come back into our lives." Sophia stared at her mother in shock. She had never seen her this angry, this fearful. "Mom, wait," Sophia said, stepping forward. "I need to know. I need to meet him." Amelia turned to Sophia, her eyes filled with desperation. "Sophia, you don't understand. Logan, he's dangerous. He's my father," Sophia interrupted, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "And I deserve to know the truth." Amelia's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked as though she might argue. But then she let out a long, weary sigh. "Fine," she said quietly, "but I'm coming with you." The car ride to the estate was tense and silent. Sophia sat between her mother and Ethan, the air thick with unspoken words. Amelia's expression was a mixture of anger and resignation, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Sophia could feel the tension radiating from her, but she didn't dare say anything. As they drove further from the city, the scenery began to change. The bustling streets of New Jersey gave way to rolling hills and dense forests, the roads winding through stretches of open countryside. Sophia stared out the window, her mind racing with questions she couldn't articulate. Finally, the car turned onto a long, cobblestone driveway flanked by towering oak trees. A sprawling mansion stood at the end of the drive, its grand facade gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. The estate was unlike anything she had ever seen, a place of elegance and wealth that felt entirely out of reach from her modest life. The car stopped, and Ethan stepped out, opening the door for them. "This way," he said, gesturing toward the front steps. Amelia hesitated, her eyes darting to Sophia. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. Sophia nodded, her resolve firm despite the nervous fluttering in her chest. "I have to do this, Mom." They climbed the steps together, and Ethan opened the heavy double doors, revealing an opulent interior. The foyer was vast, with a sweeping staircase and marble floors gleaming under an enormous chandelier's soft light. Sophia felt small and out of place, but there was no time to dwell on her discomfort. Ethan led them through several hallways until they reached a large sitting room. The air was thick with anticipation as they stepped inside. And there he was. Logan stood by the window, his back to them. He was no longer the frail, homeless man Sophia had met that morning. Dressed in a tailored suit, he exuded a quiet strength, though the weariness in his posture betrayed years of hardship. When he turned, his hazel eyes met Sophia's, and she felt a jolt of recognition. This man from the photo had haunted her thoughts for years. "Hello, Sophia," Logan said softly, his emotion-filled voice. Sophia's throat tightened, and she couldn't speak for a moment. Then, finally, she found her voice. "Hi," she said, the single word carrying a lifetime of unanswered questions. Logan's gaze shifted to Amelia, and a flicker of pain crossed his face. "Amelia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Amelia's lips pressed into a thin line. "You have no right to be here, Logan," she said, her voice cold. "I know," Logan replied, his tone filled with regret, "but I had to see her. I couldn't stay away any longer." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Sophia looked between her parents, her heart aching with the weight of their shared history. "Why now?" Sophia asked, breaking the silence. "Why, after all this time?" Logan's eyes met hers, and he seemed to struggle for words momentarily. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said finally. "And because I can't run from it anymore." Sophia took a deep breath, her hands trembling at her sides. "Then tell me," she said. "Start from the beginning." Logan nodded, his expression resolute. "You deserve nothing less." As they sat down, the story began to unfold, a tale of love, loss, and decisions made in the name of protection. For the first time, Sophia glimpsed the life her parents had once shared and the choices that had shaped her world. But as the truth came to light, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. As Logan began to speak, Sophia sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on him. She could feel her mother's tension beside her. Amelia's hands clenched tightly on her lap as if bracing for a storm. Logan's voice was steady but tinged with regret, each word weighed down by the gravity of the past. "It all began in California," he said, his hazel eyes distant, as though looking through time. "I was young, ambitious, and arrogant. My family had wealth, influence, and expectations. So many expectations. Falling in love with your mother was never part of the plan." Sophia glanced at her mother, who remained silent, her expression guarded. Logan continued, his voice softer now. "Amelia was different. She didn't care about the circles I moved in or the privileges I took for granted. She saw me for who I was, not who I was supposed to be. And I fell for her. Hard." Amelia's lips tightened, her gaze fixed on the floor. "You forgot to mention how your father hated me," she said, her voice sharp and filled with old wounds. Logan flinched but nodded. "He did. My father saw you as a threat to the future he had mapped out for me, a future that involved a carefully arranged marriage to strengthen our family's business empire." Sophia's stomach churned as the pieces began to fall into place. She had always imagined her father as a distant figure who had abandoned them out of indifference. But the story unfolding before her was far more complicated. "I tried to stand up to him," Logan said, his voice breaking slightly. "But my father was powerful, and his reach extended far beyond anything I could counter. When he found out about you, Amelia, he threatened to destroy you. He said he would ruin your reputation, your future, everything. Amelia's head snapped up, her fiery red hair catching the light. So, you left, she said bitterly. You let him win. I thought I was protecting you, Logan replied, his tone pleading. I thought if I stayed away, he'd leave you alone. I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had, you would have what? Amelia interrupted, her voice rising. Fought harder? Come back for me? You had every chance, Logan. But you didn't. Sophia felt the tension in the room reach a breaking point. She wanted to speak, to break the stalemate between them, but the weight of their history held her back. I made mistakes, Logan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I see that now, but I never stopped thinking about you, about both of you. I tried to find you, but you were always one step ahead. Because I was running, Amelia snapped. Running to protect my daughter from the man who threatened us both. Logan's head dropped, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her words. I'm sorry, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I can't undo the past, but I'm here now. I want to make things right. Sophia couldn't stay silent any longer. Mom, she said softly, touching her mother's arm. Maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to let him try. Amelia looked at her daughter, her expression conflicted. Finally, with a shaky breath, she nodded. We'll see, she said, her voice cautious. But this doesn't mean I forgive you, Logan. Not yet. Logan nodded, accepting her terms. Thank you, he said, his gaze shifting to Sophia. And thank you, Sophia, for giving me this chance. After a brief pause, Logan shared more about his life, filling in the gaps that had haunted Sophia for years. After I left, I tried to follow my father's demands, Logan said, his tone bitter. I married Ivory, a woman he handpicked for me. She was kind and understanding, but there was no love between us. I was too consumed by the loss of your mother to see what I had. Sophia leaned forward, her heart aching for the man who had once seemed like a stranger. What happened to Ivory? She asked. She left, Logan said simply. She couldn't compete with a ghost. I don't blame her. My father's empire fell apart after his death, and with it, so did my marriage. I spent years wandering, trying to figure out who I was without his shadow looming over me. And that's when you found us? Sophia pressed, her curiosity burning. Logan hesitated, his gaze flickering to Amelia before returning to Sophia. Not exactly. It was Ivory who helped me. After our divorce, she told me I needed to make peace with my past. She tracked down your mother's last known address and encouraged me to reach out. Sophia's eyes widened. Ivory did that? Why would she help you after everything? Because she's a better person than I ever deserved, Logan admitted. She knew I'd never find closure unless I found you. So, I started searching. I followed every lead and rumor until I finally found you here in New Jersey. Sophia's chest tightened as she thought about the years her father had spent searching for them. It didn't erase the pain of his absence, but added a new layer of complexity to the story she thought she knew. Amelia's voice cut through the silence, sharp and skeptical. And what happens now, Logan? You waltz back into our lives, tell us a sob story, and expect everything to be fine. No, Logan said firmly. I don't expect anything. I just want to be a part of Sophia's life, to know her, to make up for the time I lost. If that means earning your trust one step at a time, then so be it. Sophia looked between her parents, her heart heavy but hopeful. I think we all deserve a chance, she said quietly. Amelia hesitated before nodding. Fine. But if you hurt her again, Logan, I won't hesitate to cut you out of our lives for good. Logan met her gaze with unwavering sincerity. You have my word. As the conversation wound down, Sophia felt a sense of closure beginning to take root. There was still so much to unpack and so many wounds to heal, but for the first time, she felt like the pieces of her family were slowly coming together. And as she looked at her father, she realized that the answers she had been searching for her entire life were finally within reach. As the weight of Logan's story settled over the room, Sophia found herself fixated on one name, Ivory. In some ways, the woman had been the bridge between the past and the present. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of person Ivory was and why she had gone to such lengths to reconnect her father with a family he had left behind. Tell me more about her, Sophia said, breaking the silence. Ivory, what was she like? Logan smiled faintly, a bittersweet expression that spoke volumes. Ivory was remarkable, he began. She had a sharp mind, an unshakable sense of self, and a kind heart. She wasn't just my wife. She was my friend. But I didn't realize how much I relied on her until I lost her. Amelia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her arms crossed defensively. If she was so remarkable, why would she help you find us? What could she possibly gain from that? She didn't gain anything, Logan replied, his voice soft but steady. She did it because she understood me in a way few could. Ivory knew I had unfinished business. She said I couldn't move forward until I faced my past. Sophia tilted her head, her curiosity growing. And she just let you go? Helped you without resentment? Logan nodded, his hazel eyes clouded with memory. She wanted me to be happy. Even if that happiness didn't include her, before she left, she handed me a file with everything she'd found about you and your mother. Addresses, job records, even a list of places you'd lived. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or ashamed. Amelia's lips thinned. She sounds too good to be true, she muttered, though her voice lacked its earlier venom. She wasn't perfect, Logan admitted. No one is. But she believed in doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. And thanks to her, I'm here now, trying to make amends. Sophia leaned forward, her voice soft but insistent. Do you think I'll ever meet her? Logan hesitated, then shook his head. She's moved on. She has her own life now, far from mine. But if you ever meet her, I hope you'll thank her. She's the reason I found you. Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and sadness for a woman she'd likely never know. The conversation gradually shifted, the tension in the room giving way to a tentative sense of hope. Sophia could feel the threads of her fractured family beginning to weave together, though the tapestry was far from complete. I want to do this the right way, Logan said, his gaze shifting between Sophia and Amelia. No more secrets, no more running. I want to be a part of Sophia's life, but only if you both allow it. Amelia sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to process the enormity of the situation. It's not that simple, Logan. You can't just show up after 13 years and expect everything to fall into place. I know, Logan replied earnestly, but I'm willing to put in the time and effort. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. Sophia looked at her mother, sensing the inner conflict beneath her calm facade. Mom, she said gently, maybe we should give him a chance. Not for his sake, but for ours. Don't we deserve to know the truth? To stop wondering? Amelia met her daughter's gaze, her eyes filled with love and fear. I just want to protect you, she said quietly. I know, Sophia replied, but sometimes, protecting me means letting me find my answers. For a long moment, Amelia was silent. Then, with a reluctant nod, she said, all right, we'll try. But Logan, if you hurt her, if you hurt either of us, I won't hesitate to cut you out of our lives. I understand, Logan said, his voice steady. Thank you. The room fell quiet again, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, Logan stood, his movements slow and deliberate. There's something I want to show you, he said, his gaze fixed on Sophia. Curiosity flickered in her eyes. What is it? Logan smiled faintly, gesturing for her to follow. Come with me. It's something I think you'll want to see. Sophia glanced at her mother, who hesitated before giving a slight nod of approval. Together, they followed Logan through the sprawling mansion, his footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors. He led them to a sunlit room at the far end of the house. Inside, the walls were lined with paintings, landscapes, portraits, and abstract designs that seemed to capture a world of emotion. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the style. These are Mom's, she whispered, stepping closer to one of the canvases. Logan nodded, his expression solemn. I've been collecting them for years. Whenever I found one of her works, it felt like I was holding a piece of her, of you. Amelia stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. You kept these, she murmured, her voice barely audible. They were all I had of you, Logan admitted. They reminded me of what I'd lost, and what I was still searching for. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she looked at the paintings, each one a testament to the life her mother had built in his absence. "Mom," she said softly, "you never told me you sold your art." Amelia shrugged, her voice trembling. "It was a way to make ends meet. I never thought they'd end up here." Logan stepped closer, his gaze earnest. "I don't expect forgiveness, Amelia, but I hope these can be a starting point to show you that I never stopped caring." Amelia stared at him, her emotions warring within her. Finally, she nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "It's a start," she said quietly. Sophia felt a spark of hope ignite within her. For the first time, she felt her family's fractured pieces were beginning to fit together. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would be long, but for the first time, she believed they could make it work. And that belief, fragile though it was enough. In the days that followed, Sophia spent more time with Logan, peeling back the layers of the man who had been a mystery her entire life. At first, their conversations were guarded, filled with tentative questions and cautious answers. But as they grew more comfortable, an undeniable bond began to form between them. One afternoon, Logan invited Sophia to the mansion's music room. The space was vast and elegant, with polished wood floors and shelves lined with old records and instruments. In the center of the room stood a grand piano, its surface gleaming in the sunlight streaming through tall windows. "This was my mother's piano," Logan explained, running his fingers lightly over the keys. "She taught me to play when I was your age." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You can play?" Logan chuckled, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "I haven't in years, but I thought it might be fun to try again. With you?" Sophia hesitated, her gaze shifting to the piano. She had never learned to play an instrument, but sharing something so personal with her father intrigued her. "All right," she said, sitting beside him on the bench. "But don't expect me to be any good." Logan smiled, his hazel eyes lighting up with warmth. "It's not about being good. It's about making music together." He placed her hands on the keys, guiding her through a simple melody. At first, Sophia's fingers stumbled, producing clumsy notes that echoed awkwardly in the room. But Logan was patient, encouraging her with gentle words and a steady hand. By the time they finished, Sophia was laughing, her cheeks flushed with joy. "That was terrible," she said, shaking her head. "No," Logan replied, his smile widening. "It was perfect." For the first time, Sophia felt a sense of connection she hadn't realized she was missing. Logan wasn't just her father. He was someone who wanted to share his world with her, piece by piece. Amelia watched from the doorway as Sophia and Logan played the piano together, her emotions swirling in a complicated storm. Part of her still resented Logan for the years he had missed, for the pain his absence had caused. But another part of her, one she was reluctant to acknowledge, felt a flicker of hope. That evening, after Sophia had gone to bed, Amelia found Logan sitting in the garden. The cool night air was filled with the soft hum of crickets, and the scent of blooming flowers drifted on the breeze. "You're good with her," Amelia said, breaking the silence. Logan turned, surprised but pleased by her presence. "She makes it easy," he replied. Amelia hesitated, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I still don't trust you, Logan, but I can see you're trying. And for Sophia's sake, I'm willing to give you a chance." Logan nodded, his expression solemn. "That's all I ask." They sat silently for a while, the weight of their shared history settling between them. Finally, Amelia spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I loved you once," she admitted, "and maybe I never really stopped. But I need to know you won't hurt her, or me again." Logan met her gaze, his hazel eyes filled with sincerity. "I swear to you, Amelia, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I've done." Amelia studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then let's take it one day at a time." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Weeks turned into months, and the Carter family began to settle into a new rhythm. Logan visited often, taking Sophia to art galleries and music stores, places he knew would spark her creativity. Amelia remained cautious, but relaxed enough to see Logan's genuine efforts. One crisp autumn morning, Logan arrived with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting across from Amelia and Sophia at their modest kitchen table. "I want you both to move in with me. The mansion has more than enough space, and it'll give us a chance to be a real family." Sophia's eyes widened, her heart leaping at the idea of living in such a grand place. But she quickly turned to her mother, who looked less confident. "I don't know," Amelia said, her voice hesitant. "This is our home. We've built a life here." "And I respect that," Logan replied. "But think about what we could have together. Sophia could have opportunities we never dreamed of. Music lessons, art programs, anything she wants. And you, Amelia, you could focus on your art without worrying about finances." Amelia hesitated, her gaze flickering to Sophia. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Sophia bit her lip, her thoughts racing. Living with Logan was exciting, but she didn't want to pressure her mother. "I think it could be amazing," she said carefully. "But only if you're comfortable with it, Mom." Amelia looked at Logan, then at her daughter. Finally, she sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. "All right," she said. "We'll try it. But only on a trial basis." Logan grinned, his relief evident. "That's all I asked." As they packed their belongings and prepared for the move, Sophia felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't experienced in years. This was more than a new house. It was a new chapter, a chance to rebuild the family she had always dreamed of. As they stepped through the mansion's doors together, hand in hand, Sophia knew they were finally moving forward, not as broken pieces of the past, but as a family ready to face the future together.